Hi everyone, welcome to another Maxable webinar, how to design an accessory dwelling unit. These are strange and weird times for all of us, so I hope that you guys have been feeling okay, that you've been able to stay home and be safe during all of this. And despite kind of all the craziness in the world, we are still going to educate everyone today and have a really great webinar. We had just over 300 people register. It looks like we've got about 100 plus people on the line now, and people are still joining us. So I'm really excited to kick this one off with you guys. We also had over 100 questions submitted that you guys wanted answers to. So we highlighted some of our favorites, and at the end of this, we're going to make sure that we circle back to that. We have two really big announcements to make. One I'm going to make at the beginning of the webinar, and one I'll be making at the very end with a big special surprise for you guys as a thank you for joining. So make sure that you tune in for that as well. So without further ado, let's get this kicked off. So let me get into present mode here. Okay. Hopefully you guys are seeing my screen now. Sadie, let me know if you're not seeing my screen. Okay, so you guys are familiar with who we are. We're Maxable. We are California's leading ADU designer and educator. So with everything going on, I do want to just kind of reiterate a few things at the beginning, and kind of the biggest takeaway is that people still need housing. So one of the things that's been really kind of encouraging to see is that Governor Newsom has labeled housing construction an essential service. So if you look at, there's only some essential services that are still open in the state, and housing construction is one of them. With that being said, you know, within 5 years, California is going to be 3.5 million units of housing short of housing, which is a gigantic gap for us to overcome, which is part of the reason why we've been seeing so many ADU bills coming through the state that's been making everything a lot easier for people. Another thing is that even during recession times, people still need a place to live. And so one of the conversations that I was having with one of our Maxable consultants who's had her ADU now for 15 years in Los Angeles, is she said, you know, my accessory dwelling unit is recession proof. You know, she said, life has thrown me so many curveballs, whether that's being laid off from a job or having a family member be in need that I wasn't expecting, or having this global pandemic occur, things that we could never even anticipate happening. She's like, I've had rental income through this whole 15-year process. And so for me, that's just been so critical in helping me through these kind of difficult times. And then there's just still potential for millions of units to be built in California. You know, one of the really exciting legislative changes that we're seeing, or that we've seen, is that the addition of multifamily zone properties can now build accessory dwelling units as well. And in some cases, you can build more than one. So investors in particular, this is something they've been really excited about. We've been working with a lot of investors throughout the state who are trying to increase the rental capacity for their properties by building additional units. So I also wanted to share this graph. This is by Cole Peterson at buildinganadu.com. He's located in Portland and does a lot of outreach work for ADUs in Portland. And he shared this graph with me, which I wanted to then share with you guys. And basically what this is showing is what happened during the recession in 2009. So you can see that house prices started tumbling, and ADU, and then the green line represents ADU permits that were being pulled. So even as the housing market was crashing, people were still building ADUs at a really amazing rate. And so I think obviously what we're all going through right now is really unlike any normal recession. And this is just one data point, one city. But it is kind of encouraging to see that there are some benefits actually to being able to build and move things forward in a recession. You know, one of the things we saw in 2009 with a recession around construction is that construction prices dropped. There's less demand for people doing kitchen remodels and additions that aren't going to be generating income for them. So people start to cut back on construction and renovation projects that aren't generating revenue. But that means that people wanting to build ADUs have just a lot more resources available to them at lower price points. So kind of going against the curve can really be advantageous in times like this. So at Maxable, we've helped a lot of people with accessory dwelling units. We've conducted over 500 home evaluations throughout the state where we go out one-on-one, walk homeowners through their property, what their options are, how much things are going to cost. We have over 100 ADU projects under works on the design side, so we have a ton of ADU experience. Our big areas that we focus in are San Diego, Los Angeles, and the Bay Area. So if you are in one of those hotspots, we can definitely help you. So like I mentioned at the beginning of this, we have two big announcements. And so I wanted to share the one at the beginning. I'm really, really excited to talk about this because it's been something that's been in the works for us for a while. And then with everything that's been going on, we've really sped up our development on it. So we'll be announcing within the month the start of our online course. So we've been developing a course called How to Design Your Granny Flat, a comprehensive blueprint to transform your backyard or garage. And we have pulled in some amazing interviews from different experts, people who have ADUs in their backyard and are renting them. One of our interviews that I really liked was all about value engineering, which talks about how you can save on cost through designing smart. And that interview was with someone who had flipped over 300 homes in LA and had worked extensively in the housing and renovation market for over a decade. So we have some really great content that we've packed into this course for you guys. There's 13 different lessons, and here's just a sampling of some of the things that you'll learn in the course. So how to map your goals to the design process, small space hacks, how to do more with less, California essentials for indoor and outdoor living, short-term and long-term rentals decoded. And this is where we interviewed different people with ADUs that are using them for different purposes. So you can kind of get an idea of the pros and cons of each type of rental. Design tips to maximize your investment. We want you to also understand major cost drivers for a project. So where does the budget get allocated to, and just how to make the most of your space. So there's a number of video lessons, there's PDF downloads, there's slideshows. And so we think that you guys are really gonna get a lot of value out of this online course. We also put together 3 course bonuses. So the first is you'll see 3 full submittal packages for permitted ADUs that actually were designed by us and went through the whole process. You'll see floor plans for 2 units in particular that were very, very popular, including video tours of those units. And for those that are located in the areas that we service, anyone who goes through the course and completes it would receive a free design proposal as well as a credit towards your design should you decide to go to Maxable, which of course you wouldn't have to, but that is just something that we would offer as a bonus. Okay, so now that we've gotten that exciting announcement out of the way, we're going to jump into the meat and potatoes of the webinar. And then as a special thank you guys for joining, I do have a little gift for you guys at the end of this as well. So for those of you who stay on, we'll talk about our other big announcement at the end. So let's talk about how to design an accessory dwelling unit. So there's so many decisions and things that go into thinking about one of these. And so we're going to touch on just a few items to think about tonight. And I'm also going to show you guys some really fun, cool pictures of units that we really love the design on, so you guys can get some ideas. So the first thing I want to talk about is that the HGTV magic isn't real. And so as much as we all love Chip and Joanna Gain, and I do, I just want you guys to understand that what happens on TV is not how it happens in real life. So the process that these TV shows depict, you know, they have construction crews of 40 or 50 people working 24 hours a day to get these projects done. The budgets often are they're filming in, Midwest or rural towns where the construction costs or labor costs are very, very low. So we're definitely going to touch on cost today and what things cost. But I do want to just set expectations appropriately. These are complicated projects because in essence, you're building a little mini house on your property. So it has all the complexity of a 3,000 square foot home packed into a small footprint. You're dealing with existing site constraints. So, trees, existing house, setback requirements, you don't have a blank lot. So from start to finish in good times, an ADU, we usually ballpark around 9 months from start to finish. With things like the coronavirus going on where construction crews are a little more hampered in their ability to work, like there's new safety guidelines that are being rolled out for construction crews. So we're expecting to see smaller crews working at a time so that people can maintain 6-foot distance from each other. We're expecting that sourcing some materials, especially materials being manufactured in China, could be slower to come through. So just keeping in mind that things are going to keep moving, but things will happen on a slower pace than what we were expecting before. So in good times, we were ballparking about 9 months from start to finish on a project. The other thing I want to kind of show while we're like debunking the magic is there's a lot of kind of like tiny house type stuff out there, or people see things on Pinterest and they're like, oh, I just want it to look like that. A lot of this stuff is not legalized. And so I pulled this as an example. So there's a number of reasons why a building department and a planning department would never approve something that looked like this. So there's minimum distance or there's certain requirements that stairs have, for example, and there's safety requirements that stairs have to have, and these are too short and they don't have hand railings. There's head height safety, so ceilings have to be a certain amount of height if they're appropriate for people to live in. There's clearances that you have to hit, and there's also energy efficiency guidelines. So things like insulation, you have to be able to pass your Title 24s, which is the energy requirement being set by the state. You need a heating and cooling system. There's requirements for location of the windows, things like egress windows, so that if there's a fire or an emergency, someone can get out of a space. Even the size of the windows, all of these things are regulated. And so on top of that, you're layering on the local municipal building code. So there's a lot of items that go into making a design legal. So here is a legal accessory dwelling unit. I'm going to show you guys a couple. We're going to do a little tour of some of these units. And the cool thing is that there's so much you can do. There's just so much flexibility and cool things you can do on the design. So I really liked this one, this little teal unit. And the cool thing about this unit is, so, like any accessory dwelling unit, it's got a full kitchen, it's got living space, it's got a bathroom. Here they've got set up a little dining space, they've got a full washer dryer, and they've got storage. And so the thing to keep in mind is that a really well designed 400 square foot space is so much more desirable than a poorly designed 600 square foot space. And this is why I think it's really critical you work with an architect or a designer that really understands ADUs, because designing for small spaces is a different ballgame. I mean, every little part of the design matters, and you want to think about the cubic foot as opposed to the square foot in small spaces. And then I can't emphasize enough storage, storage, storage. Even if you're thinking about building an accessory dwelling unit for a short-term rental, you never know what's going to happen in the future. I think this coronavirus is a perfect example of a lot of people that had Airbnbs that are now scrambling to try to put long-term tenants into them, because Airbnb is imploding on itself. And so storage is so necessary for a successful long-term rental. People need a space to put their things. So if there's one takeaway in this whole design process today, it's remember your storage. Here's the kitchen, a close-up of the kitchen. So some of the things that I really like about the kitchen, they kept it simple. The subway tiles are very popular. you know, I love to see when people use kitchen appliances that aren't necessarily full size, because it just really scales with the size of the kitchen. And so this was kind of an interesting take on their refrigerator, that they've managed to keep all below the counter, which was one of the first times I had seen that. And even in this kitchen, I mean, think about it. This is the same size kitchen as a lot of apartments have. They still managed to get a dishwasher in there. They still have counter space to cook. They've got their stovetop and their oven and their microwave. And they didn't do this in a way that really broke the budget. I mean, these are, you know, entry level, you know, cabinets, and subway tile is not an expensive thing to do. One thing that and this is something actually we mentioned in the course, I would not recommend going with a white grout, especially in the kitchen. I don't know how neat you guys are or how neat you would expect tenants to be, but white grout is very difficult to keep clean. So if you are going with kind of a classic look with subway tile, I always recommend going with a darker grout. Here's the bedroom. So there's two pictures here, one with the closet open and one with the closet closed. And I just wanted to show you guys how much storage they've managed to pack into this small little 1-bedroom space. And it's just so wonderful that they were able to get the washer dryer combo. A lot of these ADUs are doing stackable washer dryers. It's very, very popular, but you could also look at a washer dryer combo. They actually sell these in Costco, the washer dryer combos. They take a little bit longer to dry than a typical dryer, but it does save you quite a bit of space. So instead of having a washer dryer stacked, you could have a shelf and then have storage above, and, you know, basically cut down the amount of space used in half. So anyway, there's a lot of really cool appliances out there that you guys can research and take a look at, and things that we mentioned in our course, that'll help you guys kind of make the most of the space that you have. So this next one is a garage conversion I wanted to share. And so I just love these examples because, you know, we just don't think of garages as feeling super homey and, you know, inviting. And then some of these garage conversions that you see, you're just so stunned by what's popular. I mean, what's possible. So garage conversions are an extremely popular type of ADU. They're definitely leading the ADU market in Los Angeles. And part of the reason is that garage conversions are the most cost-effective way to get a second rentable unit on your property. So if you have a tighter budget, or you're tight on yard space, or you want to preserve your yard, garage conversion is really a great way to go. Another great thing, or reason why I love garage conversions, is that there's a lot of regulatory benefits to converting the garage. So one of the things that's awesome for garages is that they are grandfathered in at the property line. So if your garage, and a lot of garages are built on the property line, you actually don't have to conform to the setback requirements if you're just converting the garage. Now, let's say you were going to convert the garage and add an addition. So you wanted to add an additional 400 square feet onto the garage. Most garages are a standard 20 by 20 for a 400 square foot envelope. So let's say you wanted to add another 400 square feet on it, make it an 800 square foot ADU. You can absolutely do that. But the additional square footage would have to comply to the setback requirements. So think about any new construction is going to have to apply the setbacks, but your existing garage wouldn't have to. So there are some really big benefits. Sometimes the garage conversions are also going to have lower fees, and you know, that's something that we've seen come down dramatically with all of the new bills. The removal of development impact fees has been huge. In a lot of cities across California that didn't already do away with development and impact fees, we've seen the cost of the permits come down by half, which is really wonderful to see, and I think definitely a step in the right direction. So let's take a little tour of this unit. So here's the inside, so that you can see that you know, it's not quite a studio space. They've set it up as a very small 1-bedroom, but I think they did it in a really wonderful way. I'm going to point out some of the features I really love about this. So they've got, obviously, the main feature here is the barn door, which is really a focal point for them, and it rolls on the rail system above. Barn doors are a great space-saving hack because you don't have a door opening out into a space. It's going to roll along the wall. So one of the projects that we do a video tour of in the course utilizes a barn door in a really tight, small, narrow hallway where they actually wouldn't have been able to fit a regular door anyway. So it's a great solution to take a look at. You know, a really nice barn door rail system can cost, you know, for the hardware, $200 or $300. And you could even have your general contractor build you a really cool custom door like this one. So it's kind of a, I mean, I think that they're very cool and trendy, and they can make a really nice statement piece. Like obviously in this unit, that's what they went for. You can see they've also done a polished concrete floor, which has a very cool kind of modern vibe to it. So here's that door from another angle. You can kind of get a better look at it. They went simple in the kitchen. You know, I think if you're trying to cut back on costs for the kitchen, instead of doing full upper cabinets, you can do just shelves. So you're not buying as many cabinets. But again, you know, always be thinking about storage. You know, if I were to live in this unit, you know, I'm not neat enough to have you know, my shelves look perfectly put together like that every time. And I've got a lot more cooking stuff and spices and things like that that need a place to go. So I prefer to have cabinets up above if I can, but again, it's going to depend on what it is that you're using the unit for. And then in the bottom picture, you can get another view of kind of their seating area. And then here's the bedroom and a glimpse of the bathroom. So again, the bedroom kept it simple. It's a small little bedroom. There's not a lot more you can fit in there besides the bed, but the fact that they turned it into a one bedroom is really something. I mean, people love the privacy of being able to kind of close off their bedroom space, and generally you'll see that one bedrooms are going to rent for higher than studios. In the bathroom, I really love that they just did kind of like a statement color with the mirror. I thought that was really nice. Okay. So small space hacks is something that we talk a lot about in the course. Some of just the highlights for that is you really want to look at your space holistically. You don't want to just think about the ADU. You want to think about how you use your home. You want to think about how the yard is laid out. You want to think about window placements, what views you're trying to maximize, what views you're trying to hide or minimize. Storage is your friend. So I included this ADU kitchen example because they did a great job of including a bunch of storage in the kitchen, and you want to think about other creative ways you can include storage in other places within the unit. Think about spaces as being multifunctional. So anytime a space can function you know, in more than one way, so maybe a dining room or a dining table that turns into an office desk. There's a lot of really cool, interesting furniture out there that does things like this. Like I've seen coffee tables that transform into dining room tables. There's some really cool stuff that companies are doing with Murphy beds now, where it looks like a bookcase, the whole thing spins, then it comes down as a Murphy bed, and they do not look clunky and kludgy. They look stylish and trendy and cool. So there's just so many options in that space for multifunctional. Keeping it bright, your color palette definitely matters. You know, and then there's ways that you can trick the eye to make spaces feel bigger. You know, one of the things that I can't emphasize enough in this is natural light, trying to get as much natural light into your space as possible. Things like clear story windows, things like, oh my gosh, I'm having a complete skylights. Oh, it's been a long week. Sorry, guys. Things like skylights, you know, French doors, anything that can open up the natural light is a huge positive. So, okay, so the next section is going to be about understanding cost. So I would say that this is the biggest misconception that we have people who reach out to us wanting to build, is they really don't understand what the cost is. You know, these are expensive units, and part of the reason why they're more expensive cost per square foot wise than a regular house is because you don't have economies of scale. So this is an example. These are Southern California numbers, and again, this is kind of just a rough ballpark. So, you know, take these numbers with a grain of salt. And for those of you who are joining us from Northern California, from the Bay Area, I'm sorry, but these are not your cost per square foot building numbers. I wish they were, but they are definitely higher than this. But in the same token, you guys also can command higher rents. So it kind of equals out in the end, but your upfront investment is going to be higher. So what I wanted to kind of demonstrate in this chart is that the larger you build, the cheaper your cost per square foot will end up being. So you want to think about what your goals are, because so at the same time, if you build larger, your cost per square foot numbers will go down. But at the same time, you don't want to overbuild for what it is you're trying to do. So we have a lot of clients who have come to us and said, well, I can build 1,200 square feet by my ADU ordinance, and I want to maximize my rental potential, and I want to build a 1,200 square foot ADU, and it's going to be great. It's 2 bedrooms and this and that. But the reality is you can have a really awesome 2-bedroom unit that's 800 square feet, and you probably aren't going to be able to command that much higher of a rent for a large 2-bedroom versus a medium-sized 2-bedroom. And so you could potentially save $50,000 in building costs or more by just making sure that you're picking the right size for your unit. So that's another thing that we can kind of help you evaluate and figure out. Now, let me give you another scenario. Let's say that you're building this for, yourself or for a family member or something, and you want someone's downsizing, you want a bigger unit. Then that's great to know that the larger you go, generally, the cheaper your cost per square foot will be. So here's some Southern California numbers. And for those of you who are interested we have a same chart set up for Northern California numbers. If you reach out to us, we'd be happy to email it to you. But the reason why I wanted to bring this up is a couple reasons. So first, the cost per square foot numbers are fairly deceiving, and I don't really like looking at projects as cost per square foot numbers. It makes me kind of uncomfortable because these projects are very unique, and there's a lot of variables that could increase or decrease the cost for a project. So we actually like to talk about project costs in terms of like base rates depending on project type. So thinking about generally in Southern California, garage conversions start at about $90,000. I think it would be hard to do a garage conversion that was going to be less than $90,000 all in. Small detached accessory dwelling units, so in that 400, 500 square foot range, you're looking at about 150, and then so on and so up. So the other thing I wanted to mention in this chart is, people feel a little shocked sometimes when they see the prices. They think, oh my gosh, this project's going to cost me $150,000 to build, a 500 square foot 1-bedroom. But if you were to look at taking out a loan, and right now is a great time to borrow because interest rates are so low, although they've done a little spike since, because banks are kind of trying to get everything back under control, but we're expecting them to decrease again. So now is a great time to borrow as opposed to taking money out of the market. But if you were to borrow $150,000 for your project and you weren't going to pay a cent of your own money, your monthly loan payment on a 30-year fixed loan, I think we ran these numbers at 3.5%, your monthly loan payment would be $700. And so again, that's not a penny out of your pocket. And if you're looking at, you want to research what a market rate rent would be in your neighborhood, but let's just take an average of $1,600, which, in some neighborhoods could command far higher than that. You're cash flow positive of almost $900 every month, which is pretty unbelievable. So even though these have a high upfront cost, there's so many financing options that are available for people that really make these projects affordable. So I wanted to give you guys 2 case studies. This one was a project we did in North Park, which is in San Diego. So it was a single family home. They had purchased the home in 2011 for $370,000. The house is now valued at $621,000. So some rough back of the napkin math, about $250,000 in equity. So their mortgage that they're paying right now is just over $1,700 a month. Units in North Park, 2-bedroom units can rent for $2,300, and that would not be unheard of. And for something of really nice construction that's brand new and designed really well, potentially more, but let's just go with the 2,300 number. So the plan here was to demolish the garage in the back. They also had alley access, which was amazing. So the plan was demolish the garage and build a 2-story, 2-bedroom unit. So the all-in cost for the project was going to be $270,000. Their plan was to finance the whole project. They did not want to pay a penny out of their own pocket. And so their monthly loan payment was $1,600 a month. The revenue they were bringing in every month from their rental was $2,300 a month in revenue. And they were seeing $700 of profit every month. So I want you guys to take a moment to think about right now, if you had an extra $700 a month, what would you use that money for? It would make a big difference in your life, right? And the nice thing about this model is it doesn't even take into account the increase in property value. So it's only taking into account the revenue earned through the rental. Another opportunity for this particular couple is that they could build the accessory dwelling unit and design it for themselves, move into that, and then rent out their main house. And that's another option. And they could probably rent the main house for slightly more or equal value to the accessory dwelling unit. So they have this opportunity to basically design their own kind of custom home and then move into it. Here's the second case study. So this was a project we were working on in Los Angeles. So it was a 6-unit apartment. The units rent for $1,850 per unit. This was in Fairfax, LA, so popular part of Los Angeles. This particular property was purchased in 2019 for $2.1 million, which means that the mortgage per month on this one is just under $10,000 a month. And the plan was to convert 2 of these detached garages in the back into accessory dwelling units. This particular property investor had a construction crew available that was his own crew. So he was going to be able to do the project for even less than this, but we'll use kind of conservative figures that everyone would have access to. So the all-in cost for this project were slated for about $200,000. So the revenue generated from adding these 2 units in year 1 would be about $44,000. And by year 10, they would have generated revenue of $4.4 million on the project. So that's a 21 times return over investment over a 10-year period, which is just kind of an insane number. So one of the things we looked at in analyzing this particular project was, okay, well, if you're going to spend $200,000 on this project, that's $200,000 you don't have on another project. So, you know, what is the opportunity cost of doing a project like this in Fairfax versus doing something else? So one of the things that I pulled up and looked at was, what could I buy in Fairfax area of LA for $200,000? And the answer is literally nothing. You cannot buy anything in Fairfax for $200,000. And so, you know, the opportunity to be able to create housing on a lot that had, you know, to create additional units of housing on land that you already own, the numbers just really pencil out in kind of a fantastic way. So, okay, so that takes me in. That's kind of the 2 of the case studies I wanted to share with you guys. And also, just so everyone knows, we'll be able to do some questions at the end here. So if you had submitted questions previously, we took some of our favorites from those, but if you do have questions, there is a question section in there where I see it looks like some people have already been asking questions, so we'll make sure to get to those as well. So, oops. Okay, so this takes us into our next big announcement. So our next big announcement that we have for you guys is that typically our home evaluations are $300. So, but for the next month, we're going to be able to offer those virtually to you guys for $179. So it's $120 off for a virtual home eval for the next month. Here's some projects actually that we've worked on, just kind of to give you an idea of some of the different ADUs that are being designed. And for those of you who aren't familiar about a home eval, basically we pair you up with one of our Maxable consultants. Our consultants have a broad range of backgrounds. Some of them are ex-city planners. We have homeowners that are building their own ADUs or have built their own ADUs. We have educators on our team. We have people with drafting and architecture backgrounds on our team. So it's a really awesome, experienced group of people. And essentially, they research your property for you one-on-one, set up a video call with you, and go through everything that you would need to know for your property before you would get started. We do things like cost estimates. We look at the regulations. We prepare a custom property report for you. And we can also make recommendations on service providers. So we want you to kind of think of this as like your trusted partner in all of this. So we'll be sending out the coupon code for anyone who wants to sign up for a home evaluation at our discounted price. And again, that'll be for 1 month's time. So that takes me to the end of the presentation, but now I want to make sure that we leave it open for some questions. So let's see, because I know we've got a lot of really good ones. Okay, so Sadie, do you want to read out some of the questions and we can go through them?
How much does cost increase when going for a second level or a loft?
Yeah, so it's hard to say without looking at specifics. Obviously, size does matter. I mean, one of the things that's important to keep in mind is that going up is more expensive than staying flat. So it kind of depends on what your budget is. If you can keep it single story, you're going to save cost. If you know, so generally we don't recommend people go 2-story unless one, they've got a larger budget, or there's some kind of constraint in the yard, like they really want 1,000 square foot ADU and the only way they can get the square footage is to go on a second story. Another reason why you might want to go up is if there's some kind of view that you could gain from going up. So we've had clients that if they were to build above the garage, for example, they would get ocean views or canyon views, or you know, views of skyline or something like that. So that could be another reason that would be really worth the cost. But hard to say without looking at a specific project. But you know, as a general rule of thumb, yes, going up does increase cost.
How do you know what size to build your ADU?
So I think that we kind of touched on that a little bit, that it really goes back to what your goals are. And you know, you want to think about who's going to be using the unit, and you want to think about if you're looking at it as a rental, you don't want to overbuild. So one of the things I would recommend doing is, you know, going on Craigslist or Zillow, or there's a website called Rent-A-Meter, and you can, you know, check out what other listings go for in the area. You can see, okay, what are the 700 square foot 2 bedrooms going for? Okay, what are the 800 square foot bedrooms going for? What are the 900 square foot bedrooms going for? And what's the delta between those different prices? And you might find that there's actually not much of one. Like the thing that people care about even more than square footage is how many bedrooms there are. So as long as you can squeeze 2 bedrooms in there, you're really going to maximize the ROI. Now, again, if you're building for a family member, you're building for yourself, maybe you want that extra square footage. Like if I was building an accessory dwelling unit for myself, you know, I would want to go a bit larger so that I can fit all of the things that I, you know, all my craft projects and hobbies and things I like to do, and make sure I have plenty of storage. So it does kind of depend on you know, who's going to be living there.
How long does it take from permit to completion of the project?
Yeah, so this is going to depend. I mean, this is a little bit up in flux right now with all of the coronavirus stuff going on. You know, for garage conversions, previously we were seeing after the permits were pulled, you know, 3 months, you know, three-ish months, 3 to 4 months. For larger units, could be 5 to 6. I think with everything going on, build yourself some buffer. You know, add a month or two to your timeline. You know, you're going to have to be more patient than normal. But like I said, there can be some huge benefits to building during times of recession because demand is much lower, you know, generally drives costs down. Planning and building departments are less busy. So, this is a trend that we'll absolutely be keeping a very close eye on. And we collect a lot of data from not just our own projects, but from partners that we work with throughout the state. So, we'll definitely keep everyone informed with what we're seeing.
How do I go about choosing an architect or designer for my ADU?
Yeah, so this is another topic that we talk about pretty extensively in our online course. I think in essence, you really want to work with someone that has accessory dwelling unit experience. That's kind of the number one. So regulations are changing very quickly, and if you're working with someone that's not specialized, the chance that they're up to date on everything is less likely. And the other thing that you'll find is that you want someone that's really well informed that can push back against cities when something goes wrong. So, I'll give you an example of a project we're working on in Glendale right now where we got comments back from the plan check and they said, oh, you can't have, we had designed French doors that open up onto a patio space in front of the unit. And they said, oh, you can't have any openings facing the street. And we were savvy enough to know that that's in conflict with some of the state regulations. And so we are able to push back against the planners, and we're willing to fight that fight with them and say, hey, no, you can't jerk us around like this. I think the other thing to look for in a designer is someone who has experience with small spaces, because again, it's different than designing a 3,000 square foot house. And so also looking for the communication of the person, and looking at some of their past work and their portfolio, and making sure that they have stuff that you really like. I mean, I think those are the things that I would recommend, but more than anything is someone that specializes in accessory dwelling units. It's really critical.
How do different design choices affect construction costs? Like, for example, window sizes, ceiling height, sliding material, that sort of thing.
Yeah, so the level of finish you choose definitely affects cost in a big way. But there's lots of things that you can do in the design to improve the feel of the space that isn't going to be that expensive to add if you're building from scratch. So, doing a vaulted ceiling when you're building something from the ground up is not going to add that much cost than building something standalone. But if you're looking at a garage conversion, vaulting a ceiling in the garage, potentially could add a lot more cost. So it's kind of, again, I think it really does all go back to your goals. Like, you want to work with a designer that's going to say, okay, well, give me your dream list of what it is that you want. And then let's pair that dream to the reality of the budget and work with you to try to figure out, okay, well, what do you feel like you don't want to compromise at all on versus what, you feel like can go. So it might be that you want some kind of statement, wall or something, and we can do that in an inexpensive way. But your super fancy custom tile in the bathroom is going to have to go, but there are a lot of tricks to the cost savings piece. There's definitely a lot of tricks.
Can you talk about the amnesty program and what that entails exactly?
Yeah, so one of the big regulatory pieces that passed, which has been huge, is this amnesty program of being able to, if you have an unpermitted unit, go through the amnesty process for that. So that's something that we've done a lot with. We have, and there's different, basically building and safety departments want to make sure that what people are living in is safe. And so one of the great things about the amnesty program is they don't necessarily need you to bring it up to current building code, but they need you to bring it up to fire and safety code. And so there's this really awesome opportunity for people to work with the cities to get units permitted that otherwise would have been a lot more problematic, or a lot of cities really weren't playing ball with allowing programs like this to exist, or they were making homeowners fill out unbelievable amounts of paperwork or slapping huge prohibitive fees on it. And I think there's just like a general distrust of like coming forward and offering this information to cities because homeowners are scared. But yeah, it is a great time to permit an unpermitted unit.
What is the difference between stick-built and manufactured home?
Yeah, so a stick-built home is a type of construction that we're all the most familiar with. That's the way probably everyone on this webinar's house was built. It's traditional ground-up construction. Manufactured housing is different from stick-built because it's built off-site and then driven and dropped off. So and it goes through its inspection process, usually at the state level. And so all of the inspections happen in a factory. It's being built in a factory, and then a semi truck is either driving it to the site and backing it in on rollers onto the site, or you guys have probably seen images or videos of cranes dropping manufactured housing off on a site. So some of the benefits of manufactured housing are that it's much faster, typically, depending on the factory lead times for a project, but generally it's a lot faster, and you can have the site prep work happen in tandem with the factory construction work. So you don't need, you don't have to you can do things in parallel. One of the big downsides of manufactured housing, though, is that it doesn't appraise at the same level that stick-built housing appraises for. So that's something to keep in mind. If the resale value of your house is important to you, then going with a manufactured option sometimes is not a good route. The other thing to think about with manufactured housing is that your financing options can be different. So a lot of lenders will not finance a manufactured house if there's a stick-built house on the site. So you wouldn't have the option, for example, of doing a renovation loan, although you could do something like a cash out refinance where you're pulling equity basically out of your house. Then the bank doesn't care what you're doing with the money, but you can be constrained in your financing options. So that is something that if you're interested in manufactured, to make sure you look into early, that you would be able to qualify for the loan you're thinking.
What's one of the biggest mistakes that people make when designing their ADU?
I think the biggest mistake people make is not hiring the right people. I mean, it's funny, having been in this position now for a couple years, we hear a lot of really great stories, but people also reach out with horror stories that they want to share with me. So, we get emails asking for help when things have gone horribly wrong with something. And I think that a lot of people don't realize the amount of work that goes into the architecture design process. I mean, these are professionals who, like, the building code is so detailed and there's so many pages. And it's a lot more than just drawing a floor plan and a layout and being like, okay, yeah, here's the ADU. I mean, you have to get a structural engineer to stamp on the plans and approve them. You need to do your Title 24 calculations. You need to do a site plan, which includes drawings for the whole house. You need to be able to navigate and work with the city, and you have to understand how to design it in a way that's going to receive the least amount of resistance at the planning counter. You have to understand that what they say at initial plan check might not actually always be true. So how do you know who you can trust with who you're talking to? How do you know how to fight back? And so I think, wanting to skimp on the design services at the beginning and feel like, oh, well, I'm just going to go with this cheap option, and then having that blow up in your face and not get a project that you really, really love because it was poorly designed, I think is probably the biggest mistake that people make.
How do you recommend people go about the permitting process during COVID-19?
Yeah, so this is interesting. I've been talking a lot with my friends about how behavioral and social norms will be affected coming out of crisis like this. So for example, I think there's going to be some positives that come out of this. Like, one of the things that we're expecting is that work from home will be a more socially accepted part of our culture. I think in California, where things are generally pretty progressive, businesses are coming around to the idea of, working from home one day a week or something like that. But, I have a lot of friends in the Midwest and the East Coast where the work from home concept is still, totally stigmatized. But I think one of the really cool things that are going to come out of this is it's going to force planning departments to put a lot of their systems online. I mean, it's really amazing that in this day and age, not all of our planning and building department systems aren't online. Why do we still have to print, spend hundreds of dollars printing out these giant sheets of paper to walk down and hire expediters to bring down to the planning department counters and go through all these? I mean, so I think actually in the long run, we're going to see some really awesome things happen out of this, where it's going to force cities to be a little more efficient and kind of get in the 21st century. I think, what we're going to see in the near term is that some building and planning departments are going to be operating with limited capacity. We've already seen some just open up online exclusively. So we're kind of keeping tabs on, who's still fully operational, who's kind of limping along, who's temporarily shut down. But I think at the end of the day, housing and construction is such a giant, important issue with the state that this isn't going to be a system that can remain shut down long term.
Can you touch on a few more creative space saving and storage ideas for the ADU?
Yeah, let me think through some of the creative things I've seen. I mean, some of the cool things is you're designing this completely from scratch, and so you can literally do anything you want. I mean, even simple things like just placing the plugs in the right spot, or doing things like, adding USB chargers into all your plugs, or into a handful of your plugs. Not, you don't need them for all of them, but like, putting USB chargers into your kitchen plugs or your bedroom plugs so that you don't need the adapters. Little things like that. You're just like, oh, that's so nice. I've seen people make like custom charging racks in their wall. So there was an ADU we toured in Portland that they had constructed this wooden slits that went into the wall, and they could stick their iPad in it, they could stick their laptop in it, they could stick their phone in it, and they all had this like custom charging ports that were built in that was really cool. I've seen people do really awesome things with creating storage under seating. So, you have like an L-shaped built-in or something like that, and like a breakfast nook or whatever, but there's drawers underneath that pull out and you have a bunch of storage in there. I've seen clever things done under staircases where, normally that would be underutilized space, but you can create storage under there. I mean, you just want to think creatively about it. And but yeah, and then even just things, like I said, creating natural light or creating indoor-outdoor space so that your space feels bigger, using tricks like creating long sight lines so that the space feels bigger. Like there's a lot of things you can do to kind of trick the eye too, that will really help with the design of the unit.
Is it typically less expensive to convert a garage than it is to build from the ground up?
Yes. So garages are definitely the most cost-efficient way to get a second rentable unit on your property. Where you start to lose the cost savings on your garage is if you mess with the envelope of the garage. So when we talked about that addition earlier of adding an addition onto the garage, when you're breaking into those load-bearing walls and those in the roof line and things like that, that's where the efficiency of the garage starts to go away. So, if you're on a tight budget and you want to get a second rentable unit, building within the constraining yourself to the actual footprint of the garage is going to be the most cost-effective way to do it.
Can you touch on JADUs and how different the design process is for that to an ADU?
Yeah, so JADUs, just so everyone knows, is a junior accessory dwelling unit. It has to be under the footprint of the main house, or if you're converting a garage, it must be attached to the main house. It has to be under 500 square feet. There's some other requirements with JADUs. One of the other big requirements is that it requires owner occupancy. You might be thinking, hey, wait a second, I thought owner occupancy was banned for the next 5 years and then I'm grandfathered into no owner occupancy going forward. That is true for ADUs. It's not true for JADUs. So that's something to keep in mind when you're looking at a JADU. But the process really isn't going to be that different. I mean, you're still going to have to work with a designer to come up with your design. You're still going to have to most likely get a structural engineer to stamp off on it. You're going to have to create, your designer is going to create the submittal package. You'll submit it to the city. It's going to go through plan check and the building department and fire and safety and engineering, and it's going to get all of its stamps. And then permits will be pulled and you'll be able to start construction. So the process really of doing the JADU versus the ADU really isn't very different. It's just the constraints really of the type of unit. Like a JADU has all these additional constraints that a regular ADU doesn't have to contend with. And then I think we've got time for one more question, Sadie. So if you want to come up with one more really good question.
We have a couple architects in our audience, and they were wondering if the online course would be helpful in their profession.
So I would say that the online course is really targeted for homeowners. But if you're in the process of designing ADUs, I mean, we are showing a ton of examples. We show technical floor plans and detailed submittal packages. So from that perspective, it could be useful for your practice, but we definitely did target it towards homeowners. So, okay, everyone, well, thank you so much for joining us on this webinar. And again, I hope that all of you are staying safe during this time. I hope that your families are okay. I hope that you're all staying home so that we can flatten the curve. But yeah, these are scary times and intense times, and we feel that too. So we want to be a resource for you guys. We want to be able to help you through this. We want to support you. So please do not hesitate to reach out to us. We offer free phone consultations. We want to get you guys the support that you need for your project. So please look at us as a resource, and and have a wonderful evening, and thank you guys so much for joining.